This la 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 la. The meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. That's good. Let's just see if that's true. I'm a couple of minutes early just to make sure that this is working okay. Let me see. Bear with me. Aha. There we are. Well done, Joseph. Jana, hello, hello. Ernie, nice to see you. So a bit of a change from the normal plan. Todd is en route from Sedona to Houston, and he'll be there tomorrow. So he wasn't able to oversee me, like God watching down to see that my behavior is all proper and correct, right? So we've done it this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of go through this as I normally would. For those people who are enrolled in the Sology network, this will be uploaded either tomorrow or the next day. So that will be available. But it will always be available now on my Facebook site. And later on, I'll... Hello, real love. God has indeed left the building, and he's on his way to brighten the hearts and minds of all those in Houston, Texas. So that's the plan. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name's Dr. Joe Delaney. I'm not a doctor of medicine, but I'm a doctor in medicine. And all that simply means is that I did a PhD in medicine for over 7 years. Excuse me. And I basically looked at how the heart and the brain are connected with one another, and how they constantly send information back and forth all the time in order to help us choose healthy options. But that doesn't seem to be happening very often, and in stress, what actually happens is we live our lives on the defensive. And what this led me to, it started off as a very proper scientific thing, but it led me into the land of woo-woo, because woo-woo works wonders for well-being on the Wirral, and I live on a place called the Wirral. So I looked at the mind-body connection then. So not just heart and brain and heart, but I also looked at the connection between the mind and the body. And it took me down all sorts of different rabbit holes where I've had to sort of contemplate deeper things and maybe higher things. And where it then led me to was looking at philosophies, ancient wisdom philosophies from across the planet. And that basically took me back to the Vedas, and Ayurvedic medicine and stuff like that, philosophies that have been around for many, many, many thousands of years. And I'm beginning to see now that maybe they knew more than we could possibly realize. And so I've looked into all these different things now, and I've sort of developed what I call the IAM approach to health and well-being. So it's a combination of its ancient wisdom and modern science, really, neuroscience. And I'm trying to allow these two things to fuse together and to basically help people with simple, straightforward and practical steps in order to reduce stress and tension and restore themselves to emotional calm and clear thinking as quickly as possible. And, more than anything else, what I found out was, and this is the most important that I found out, and it's so simple, is that there's an intimate and intricate relationship between the way that we breathe and the way that our heart works. And the way that our heart works sends information back to the way our brain works. And so if we breathe erratically, our heart sends erratic signals back to our head. Our head goes into a chaotic mode, and it always chooses the defensive action to take. And I'm going to explain this a little bit more. I didn't realize I was going to do the lecture without the slides, but there you go. So this is really about the neuroscience of stress management based upon ancient practiced philosophies from thousands of years ago, but now backed up with much neuroscientific, credible evidence, and so that's what that's about. And I can see people are joining us now. I don't know whether I'll have an opportunity to keep looking down at the comments, but I'll do the best that I can. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put up the slides. Now, for those people on Sology, I hope you had an opportunity to download the questionnaire, the stress questionnaire. If not, it doesn't matter. You can fill it in, but be as honest as you can when you fill it in. I'm going to give you the scores on the doors in this presentation. And it's a questionnaire that I've used now for many, many years. It's from the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health in the UK. And I think that it's very reliable and it's very valid, but it's just an indication, really. And all I can say to you is that no matter what score you get, there's always, always room for improvement. And more than anything else, I'm hoping that this little talk will help you to, rather than look outside for answers, it will help you to maybe start to become more aware of your inner intelligence, your innate intelligence, and be guided by your own inspiration and intuition from deep within yourselves, because that's basically what I learned. Oh, I forgot to tell you, by the way, the reason I'm so enthusiastic about this is because after many, many years of stress and anxiety and depression, I took to alcohol to try and solve all my problems. Initially, for about 5 minutes, it did, but then it created all sorts of shit in my life, And then in the end, I got into such a state, I lost my wife and kids, I lost my job, I lost my driving license, I lost my liberty, and I lost my home. And I ended up sleeping on a park bench, So that's basically where my thinking took me. So what I'm trying to help everybody with is to get out of the head and into the heart, and to sink deep into the heart, because that is the seat of intuition and inner guidance that will help you, right? If you follow the instructions from the still small voice, if you follow the instructions, I swear to you that your life will improve beyond measure, beyond your wildest dreams, because that's what's happened to me. So enough of this now, but I'm glad to say that my whole life turned around for the better. And the last 35 to 40 years of my life have been nothing but miraculous, really. And I sort of feel that I have a mission to share my experience, my strength, and my hope with people, so that they can maybe identify and maybe take on board some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. So that's basically what this is about. It's my personal lived experience, and I'm going to try and put it in a sort of academic way so that it can help people. So bear with me while I set up my PowerPoint. So if I go to there again, hang on. So the PowerPoint's ready. I just need to share my screen. There it is. That's looking good. Oh God, there's another version of me up there. Must be my alter ego, hey? So there we are. I might just ask if everybody can see that. Can somebody just give me a yes or a no? And then I'll carry on then. I much prefer to be in a room with people. It's much easier, but we'll work with what we've got. So can everybody see that okay? Hello, Jonathan Malloy. I hope you're keeping well. Nobody want to talk to me? Okay, well, I'm just going to carry on anyway. And oh, there we go. Thanks very much, Tony. Nice to see you, mate. Okay, so this is what it's called. It's called the IAM approach to health and well-being. And the IAM, from ancient wisdom traditions, is basically the source of all creation. So I'm going to talk about yoga philosophy now. And from the primary source of creation, the Big Bang, if you like, all sorts, the universes were created, and all sorts of stars and stardust was created. And then basically that became us. And this picture here is a representation of the person, an individual person that's being influenced, because I honestly believe now that, becoming a romantic old fool in my old age, but, we are stardust, and we're basically made from the same compositions as basically the universes. And so what actually happens is we ascend up this ladder here. This is called the caduceus. It's the symbol of medicine. And what we do basically is we come in here when we're born. This is conception. And then if everything's fine, we rise up here, we face the challenges of life, and then we rise up this central pillar. And right at the end, we gain our wings and we go back to source consciousness itself. And there's lots of psychology involved in this as well. But what generally happens is we set ourselves a task before we come here to make it a bit difficult and exciting for ourselves. And it's a bit like Jason and the Argonauts. I remember that, seeing that at Christmas, and he goes through all these trials and tribulations, but with the help of the gods, he's able to finally get his wings. But he's had a lot of fun on the way and a lot of pain and a lot of fights and stuff like that. So from there, then, these sort of holes in the intertwined snakes, and this represents the nervous system, by the way, these holes are also aligned with what's called the esoteric chakras. So if you're into yoga, you'll obviously know about chakras. But what I've tried to do is I've tried to align them as well with the 7 major endocrine glands in the human body. But that's for another day. So the chakras, as we go along, they increase in frequency or wavelength, really. And as the wavelength changes, the colors change. So we're increasing there in frequency. And as we increase in frequency, the composition changes and the color changes. And each one of these colors represents a different attitude in the human being. So it's fascinating, really. And I think modern science, right, in its infinite non-wisdom, has only been sort of switched onto this in the last couple of 100 years, really. And they're starting to move much, much more in favor of looking at a more holistic approach to things. So I don't know whether that's making sense so far, but the session today we'll recap from session 4. So anybody who's seen the previous sessions, right, I'll try and recap on what we did there. I'll look at some answers and questions that people put up on the Padlet, and I'll try and whiz through those quickly. And we'll look at what exactly is stress, because everybody says, don't they, oh, I'm stressed. But what they mean is I'm under strain, really. And stress is a response, really, to strain, but let's not go too far down that. So it's about stress and strain, but more than anything else we'll look at the relationship between stress and pressure. How come some people can be under immense pressure and still be cool, calm, and collected, and others get a bit of a pressure on them and they just like lose it? So what's the difference there? And it all may be down to emotional sensitivity and sort of different purposes in life. And then we look at burnout and trauma, because I work in medicine a lot, and I work in the NHS, and I work in higher education. And lots of people now are burnt out and bored at the same time. So they're in this sort of a void where they've got loads and things to do. They're exhausted and they try and drive themselves on, and this puts them into a traumatic situation. And then we can look at maybe post-traumatic stress disorder and maybe complex disorders. I can have a sort of look at that and try and disentangle those, if you like. And then we look at the 3 forms of stress management. And then we'll look at some non-medical ways to restore balance. And these are personal lived experiences and the things that have worked very effectively for me. Because it's all about me. I, self, and me. That's the ism. And I'm sorry if people have heard all this before, hard luck, because there might be people on here who haven't. So just like, suck it up. So that's what we're looking at. We look at the physical side of people, and that's where when you go to your GP or you go to the doctor, they generally apply what's called the biomedical model, where they'll look at your physical body, they'll prod you, and then they'll give you some medicine if they can, based upon what they've looked up on the computer. Oh, stop it, Joseph. And then we look at the emotional side, which we tend not to look at now, but more and more people seem to be becoming more and more angry, resentful, frustrated, jealous, envious. There's all sorts of so-called negative emotions emerging very quickly, and there's a reason for that, but I haven't got time to go into it today. And then we look at the intellectual, and what generally happens is the biomedical model moved out to what's called the biopsychosocial model, and they looked at the physical aspects, and they looked at how a person's thinking and their environmental conditions, society conditions, how that impacted upon them and made them ill. they sort of sideline the emotional side of things because that's rather difficult to look at. But then they definitely put a block on this bit here, the spiritual. And when I'm talking about spiritual, I'm not talking about religious. If you are a religious person and these things work for you and religion works for you, then that's absolutely great. If it makes you a more calm person, a more healthy person, a more helpful person, carry on, you know. But spirituality to me means vitality. It means energy. This to me is basically what Tesla was talking about. If you want to know the secrets of the universe, then look at energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's where I got led to, really, is basically the area of quantum physics. And so I'm sort of basing this talk now on my understanding, and I'm still only learning, really, of quantum physics, because I don't believe that if we're not balanced in all of these components, I don't believe that we can have whole person health. But that's just my view, and I'm open to anybody else's suggestions. You know, I'm always trying to learn and help take on board, really, other people's perspectives, because I can only see out of these eyes, and other people have got much better vision and looking all around and stuff like that. So this is what I talked about last week, really, is there's an understanding now that the human being now has basically 12 skills or attributes or intelligences that they can tap into. And what actually happens is this one here represents whole person health. But there's all these different aspects, and sometimes they're called densities. There's 4 different densities of what it is to be human. And this is just the way I explain things. I'm sure there's people out there who are much better at doing it, but this is, and I'm from Seacombe, by the way, that's why I talk like this. I tried to talk posh once, you know, but I got that stressed. I went back on the drink, so I've decided just to be myself. So 1, 2, 3, there's the 3 dimensions: physical, emotional, mental. That's the first density. And then we move then into, so this is body, mind, soul, and spirit. And when I'm talking soul and spirit, I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about different vibrations and different frequencies. And I do believe that all these represent different dimensions of consciousness. So let's say, for example, that the human race is now moving from 3D into 4D and beyond. Then what would actually happen then is their thinking would change, and they might almost be forced to think in a different way and to make different choices. And I honestly believe that that's where humanity is at the moment. And more people are cracking up for a good reason, because they're still trying to keep hold of old habits, old ideas, and old emotions. But there's a great big shift happening. They're sort of being asked in a very forceful way to let go of all the old ideas, emotions, and attitudes, and to try and sink deep, where they'll be given new ideas, new values, and new ways. So that's where I think that we're up to now. We're almost being propelled now into a new way of thinking, you know, and this is sometimes called the evolutionary impulse. So we touched on that last week. If you want to know what we did last week, you'll have to sign up for Solargy and go and look at the previous things. Anyway, I'm not here to do that. It's to sell Solargy. And then if we get it all right, let me just go back again. If we get all those right, and they fit in here snugly, right? But what generally happens is we're almost programmed to be out of alignment. And our job is almost like to find out which one of these components needs to be realigned so we can fit in better, right? Otherwise, we won't get to this free-flowing state. We'll be contorted and distorted in all different areas. So what we're really aiming for is a free-flowing, full state of cosmic consciousness, let's put it that way. And I do honestly believe this. It's something that really can't be explained in words. It's more of a feeling. And I think sometimes, you know, when I get things right, I feel this influx of more energy comes in, more joy. I feel more courageous, more vital. And, you know, it's mostly by accident that these things happen. But, you know, I think that we can put ourselves in a position where these happy accidents occur more readily. And that's what I've learned. And what we also talked about last week was, we talked about the chakras again, different vibrations, different frequencies, different attitudes, different aspects. But this is what happened is, from the meridian system, the 12 meridians, which are basically the invisible magnetic energy that surrounds us. What's actually happening now in this great shift of consciousness, these are all being souped up now and almost pumped up. And what that then does is, the meridians flow, the magnetic energy of the meridians then impacts upon our nervous system. And then our nervous system, this is the brain and the spinal cord, that's the central nervous system. And then we have what's called the peripheral nervous system. So more and more information is flooding in here. If we relax, let go, and allow the process to happen, then it will send better signals here. And at the end of this, we've got our muscles and our organs and our endocrine glands. So that's what we basically touched upon last week. So what I want to do now is, I'm just going to go on to the comments and from session 4. So I'm going to click on this first. So you'll have to bear with me. I'll stop the share. I'll then go to, let's see, it takes a bit of time for me to do this. So that's there. I'm not sure where that's gone really. Let me do it again. Board more. No. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do this, but oh, there you are. Let's see if that's worked. La 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 la. There we are. Okay, that's good. So let's see if we got any questions or comments. I'm just looking at my screen on my phone here. All this technical stuff. Yes, there we are. How can I reduce pain and tenderness in my whole body without using medicines? Well, the first thing I must say, being a responsible chap, is you need to work closely with your medical professional. That might be your GP or your hospital consultant or your nurse. And you must be honest about what you're trying to do. And most professionals that I work with now, they'll work listening to the patients and trying to come to sort of an agreement between both of them. So I would say is listen to what the medical people have got to say, but also put your point of view forward as well, you know, because this is supposed to be a shared approach to your health. And this is what I've had to do over the years. And to be honest with you, I didn't have the courage to start off with, but it was only as I got more courage, right, was I able to say, well, now, hang on, doctor, this is the way I'd like it to go, you know. And I'm not trying to be funny, but they're there to serve us, and it isn't the other way around. Right, I'll get off that there quickly. So how can I reduce pain and tenderness in my whole body? Well, the philosophies that I live by and the ancient philosophies, they all believe that pain is simply an obstruction to the free flow of this vital energy. And this vital energy is called chi, prana, ki, elan vital, spirit. It's got all these different names, but it's basically like this magnetic energy that flows through us. And pain is an obstruction to that. So as soon as this energy is obstructed, then we feel pain. And the idea would be is, and I'll show you some techniques as we go along, the idea would be is to find out where the obstruction is and then do what needs to be done in order to allow that to flow again. Now, the obstruction might simply, you might have your shoelaces too tight. That would be an easy one, right? So physically, we can tune in and see if we can do anything physical, but it also may be an emotional one. You may be hanging on to all sorts of anger or grief or stuff like that. That will also cause a blockage, which will eventually lead to physical pain. You also might have ideas that contradict what's actually happening, right? And that might be another thing. You might have to let go of your ideas on how things should be and really work with how things are. And finally, you know, there may be other lessons of a sort of a deeper, more sort of spiritual sort of lesson that you need to learn. And the only way you can get into that is by sinking deeply and going into almost like a contemplation and asking your deeper self, what is it exactly that you're trying to show me here? And please give me what I need to remove these obstructions, you know. So I would say I'm going to talk about some stuff here, but the pain and tenderness and chronic pain, I'm going to talk about some methods that I've used, and they've worked amazingly well. But the only thing is they don't work if you don't do them. And that's what I found out. I have to sometimes wait till the pain's intense and I've got a really good, strong pain threshold before I do something about it. So I'm getting a little bit better of doing something before it becomes too much now. So that would be that one. Pay it, you know, I'll talk about these things later on. What's the next thing? Trigger points. Oh yeah, well, that sort of goes along with what we talked about last week. Trigger points are simply tensions or twists, if you like, in the connective tissue that surrounds muscles. So in a sense, the muscles themselves are okay. It's just that they're in this cling film that's become too tense. Now, the connective tissue or the myofascia, what that does is, this is where the meridian system and the nervous system meet one another. So the meridian system almost flows over the nervous system underneath. Now you can imagine that if the connective tissue is too tight or it's wrapped up the wrong way, then the connection between the meridians and the nervous system will be obstructed. So things like connective tissue massage, yoga, stretching, all those things can work wonders. But more than anything else is there's something called myofascial trigger point massage. And what they do is they can identify where the real tension in the connective tissue is, and they can press like hell on it for about 30 seconds and then release it. And what happens, that's called ischemic compression. What happens then is there's a flush of energy and blood through that system, and there's almost like a reconnection takes place. However, if you've been in chronic postural abnormality all of your life, it takes a long time to undo these things. So you can actually have medical treatments like Botox, I think it's called Botox injections, or you can have lignocaine, you know, local anesthetic injections help, you know. So there's all sorts of different things. Not pain, heat and cold compresses also can restore the connections. So explain again what trigger points are. I think I've done that. How do you know when you've got them? Well, you're in pain. And the thing is, if you press on a trigger point, what normally happens is, and you can Google this because there's loads of stuff, it will send a referred pattern of sensation in particular exact patterns. So sometimes there's one here in your shoulder which you press on and it sends a pattern up your neck and across your temporal region here. I think that's called TP3 in the trapezius muscle. So there's loads of stuff on Google, but in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be doing a whole session on trigger points and where they are in different parts of the body. That's that one. I hope I've done all right there. Stopping taking tablets. How can I stop taking all my tablets for pain and depression? Well, sort of answered this in the first part. I would say don't, right, don't. Please go along and be open and honest, right, with your medical professional and say to them, I'd like to stop or reduce all this medication that I'm on for pain and depression, and I'm going to try some alternative systems and try and work away. You know, I've seen people who've stopped everything under the guidance of people, and I think that's just maybe a bit too much, really. So I think it's sensible to go through a weaning process, right, and work with your medical professional. It's a responsible thing to do, you know. So jumping into extremism and stopping straight away, it will probably send your whole body and your nervous system into like it will just freak out, you know. And I've seen lots of people. And people get into their heads, you know, they get this anti-medicine idea. And that's not my personal experience. I think that we need to work with everybody, right? Including the so-called opposition. You know, it's not about fighting anybody or anything. It's trying to find out through our inner guidance what's the best way forward for us to go, you know. And so I don't know whether I've answered those very well, but I'll stop that share and I'll go back to the other thing. I'm just going to stop a second just before that. Hang on a sec. Neil's watching. Elsa's here. Hello, Elsa. Joy. Yeah. Annie. Oh, all my lovely friends. It's nice. Put some comments up if you like. Please don't put any rude things up. You can if you like, but this is going to go out public, and I'm trying to clean my image up, I'm failing miserably, but I'm doing my best anyway. Right, back to the show. The show must go on. Right, where are we? There we are. Oh, there we are. Okay, we're on that one. Sure. So that's it. I've done the questions and comments from session 4. And we're going to go on to the next one now. What is stress? Simply, stress is the adverse reaction that people have to excessive pressure or other types of demands placed upon them. So ideally, you see, we need to understand that we need some pressure, but we don't need too much pressure, because if we go into a situation where there's excessive pressure and we get out of our ability to cope in a relaxed and alert way, then we go on the defensive straight away. And most people I see now, including myself, and this was the root of my problem, most people are living life on the defensive. It's basically fear-programmed conditions that were driving my life, and I didn't know at all. I was on this rat wheel treadmill of just ducking and diving and dodging and weaving just to try and survive, basically. So I was living on survival, and I look around at the world now, and it's becoming more and more prevalent and more and more, observant, right? Or we can see it clearly that more and more people now are speeding up and trying to survive and stuff like that. So that's what I learned about myself, is that I was on the defensive for most of my life, and I had to learn to sort of let go of a lot of these programs. So any threat or demand made upon the human being, whether it comes from inside our thinking, whether it comes from external sources, whether it's physical, psychological, social, any of these things will provoke the body's defense arousal mechanisms and prepare the organism for action. And most people call that the fight and flight response. But it starts off with a fright. And the fright there is something called an ego threat. It's a threat to our ego. And our ego is basically the set of conditionings and programs that we've developed up in our life so far, really. And just to make it more fun, we also bring with us our ancestral baggage as well. And I see DNA. DNA simply, to me, is just crystallized behavior from the past, and it's almost like where we used to have like audio visual, where you could record audio visual. This is almost like the 5 senses crystallized, and sometimes those things are actually driving our behavior without us being even aware of it. So we have an ego threat, that's the fear, fight and flight response, and we automatically go into fight or flight. And what that's technically called is, right, what happens is there's a part in our midbrain that's always on the lookout, and it's almost like we've got an insecure security guard now that's looking out for danger all the time. And I realized that I was so hyper vigilant, hypersensitive, that I was just on my toes all the time, ready to pelt and get away, So I didn't have any opportunity to relax, to think more slowly, to think more deeply, and to make wiser decisions, and this is what I've learned through mindfulness and through also body awareness, and listening to what my body's trying to tell me. I've learned to be able to say no. That was really difficult. And also to create some more space where I've got more options and I can pick more healthy options. And that's what's actually happened in my own life, And what actually happens is, this is called the amygdala. It's part of it's called the limbic system. And here we have all these midbrain things, which represent where our patterns, our habits, our programs and our conditionings are all stored. And it's associated with the long-term memory and something called the hippocampus. So we've got the amygdala, we've got the hippocampus, and we've got all sorts of other structures here that are all to do basically with our survival mechanisms. And when we sense an ego threat, immediately what happens is it hijacks our clear thinking. And so we're just on the defensive thinking. And what also happens is, because we're in fear all the time, we develop this pretentious sort of a state, and it's horrible. I can see really why the drinking released me, and I got addicted to drinking, is because drinking and drug taking and all those sorts of different things, they temporarily relieve you of this, and you feel like Superman, I did. It's alcohol's disinhibitory, and all the repressed emotions and all the fearful repressed stuff, it almost like spurts out, and you get this great big jolt of vitality, and that's what used to happen in the early years of me drinking. When I drank a certain amount, I'd feel free. I could dance, I could talk to people. I didn't have any embarrassment at all. Until I woke up the next morning and thought, oh my God, did I really do that? And there were occasions as well when people used to tell me, don't you remember doing that? And they're called blackouts. I just didn't remember. Apparently I was acting right, normally, or so-called normally, but I was doing all sorts of weird things, but I just didn't know, Anyway, I digress. So this is called the amygdala hijack. And what I realized was I was hypersensitive to threat. And I was like kicking off at even the smallest things, really. So I was like a big drama queen. And somebody said to me, there's a name for this. It's called victim consciousness. Oh, I didn't like that at all. But I realized today that I was always playing the victim, and I was always pointing the finger outside of myself to say, if only these people behaved in the way that I think that they should, my life would be much better. So I was basically, I was suffering from self-centered fear, and there's a technical term for that. It's called egocentricity. And I accept it now. I see very, very clearly what it was. And people, I didn't like to hear the next thing, but I got in touch with a bloke who was dead straight with me. And, he talked about my ability to create a drama out of a crisis, just very, very quickly. But he said to me that was taking away the responsibility for my emotional growth. And he said to me, Joe, more than anything else, this is about growing up, right? And I could feel the grip in my gut, because the little child in me didn't want to hear that. But it's true, this is all to me about emotional growth, right? I don't know whether this is making sense, but I'm just going to carry on. So this is where I was really. This is the simple sort of explanation. I use this for lots of people is, I don't know many people are in this green category. Most people now are coping and getting on with it. But as they just carry on in the same old pattern, and if you keep doing the things that you always did, you'll keep getting the things that you'd always got. If you keep revolving, nothing's going to change. In fact, it's like sliding down this greasy spiral of descension, really. And lots of people I know are struggling. They're finding it really difficult. People who've really been strong emotionally, but lots of people are strong emotionally because they've gritted their teeth and get on with it. So they've repressed a lot of emotions, right? And they've tried to just carry on in this sort of normal way of life, but they're filled with stress, filled with tension, filled with pain. Chronic muscle tension, right, causes so much joint pain, it's unbelievable. So I will talk about that. And this is where I was for many, many years. I became very, very unwell, and I made 3 serious attempts to kill myself, and they failed as well. So it's no good or anything in the end, really. I couldn't live properly. I couldn't kill myself properly. It was a very tricky situation. I'm laughing now, but I wasn't laughing at the time, But what actually happened is, through various things, including some of the things I'm going to talk about now, I've been able to sort of come back here and get more strength back naturally, and then move further, one day at a time, one breath at a time, and coming back up here now. And I think that I'm coming out of the yellow and getting more in the green all the time. But I've still got loads and loads of stuff to work on, in those 4 different quadrants, really. The biological or the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual as well. And I think the spiritual one is almost like, how can I explain it? It's a feeling that I get from deep within me, and it almost like moves me to take certain actions, So if you were a religious person, you could maybe say, you were being moved by spirit or something like that. But in martial arts, they call that the Tao. and they call it, they link it to Tai Chi and Qigong and all these different sorts of things. So it's really, to me, about energy flow. So that's where people are. Lots and lots of people are burnt out and they're bored at the same time now because they're exhausted, because they're trying to apply all their old habits that maybe used to work. But in this great shift that's happening now, we're being asked to let go of that and allow, if you like, a new way of thinking to come in. And then trauma, really. This stopped me in my track. I mean, in my drinking, I was beaten up many times. I had my ribs broken, my nose broken, and all these things, And well, I mean, that's just, I've got through that now and I'm sort of working my way out of it. But burnout, it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, and it's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And that's really I was just gritting my teeth trying to get on with it, trying to survive. And it can occur when you experience long-term stress in your job. I know loads and loads of people who are so fed up with their jobs, but really, if they were able to take a bit of a step back and see it more clearly or more globally, then sometimes your attitude can change, really. And when you've worked in a physically or emotionally draining role for a long time, and it's so what happens when you've reached your limits mentally, emotionally, and physically. And sometimes, and like I did, I went to the doctors, they gave me medications to try and numb me down. So I wasn't feeling what my body was trying to tell me. And my body was simply saying to me, Joe, there's a different way. You need to rest. You need to recover. You need to recuperate. You need to slow down. You need to think deeper. And you need to start saying no. And that was really hard because I was what's called a gross people pleaser. Because when anybody asked me a favor, even before I knew what the favor was, I would be saying yes, and I grew very resentful. Well, people were I was doing all their work while they were off ski boarding and snow, So I was building more and more resentment, and the resentment led to emotional sort of stuckness, which could only be relieved by getting as drunk as a skunk, So you can see how it's all linked. And trauma, really, I think everybody's gone through trauma at some point in their life. It's a response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event or events, and I think most people are going through traumatic episodes every day now, and unless you start to sort of be able to feel when it's coming in and when the processing's coming in to tense you, how you can let go, breathe deeply, and then just tune in from a different point. I think you'll just be on the same old treadmill where things will just start to become more compressed, more contracted, and such like. So it causes feelings of helplessness, hopelessness. It diminishes the sense of self. So you just think that you're an idiot and you just can't do anything and you're a failure and all that, And this is basically to do with exhaustion. But there is a phrase, and lots of people don't like this. I didn't like it myself, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? Hope you don't get triggered. I hope you do, because I'll be able to show you why you just got triggered. But we're only as sick as our secrets. And what I found out was that my secrets, all the things I was ashamed of, all the things I felt guilty of from a long, long time, were basically pushed down into my psyche alive. They were buried alive, and they were always trying to sort of get into the light. But I kept pressing them down. So, I think I tried to work this out mentally and intellectually for a long time, because people used to say to me, Joe, you're so clever, you've got these qualifications, why are you doing these stupid things? And I really didn't have a clue. And I know today that we have to focus on feelings first, or I do. I focus on my feelings first because they're more sensitive. It gives me an idea what's processing in the unconscious part of my mind. And then I can sort of tune into the feeling and almost like ask it. I'm just explaining how I do it. I ask it, what is it that you're trying to show me? And it normally just shows me, you've just said yes there when really you should have said no. Go back. And I go, well, do I have to? And they go, yes, you do. Go back, grow up, go back and say, listen, I'm sorry about this. I'm sorry to mess you around, but I've made a mistake, but I'll have to say no because I haven't really got the time. And they're the things that I couldn't do, you see, because what will they think of me if I change my mind? Now, not many people ask me for favors these days because I just say no all the time. And I laugh a lot too. So it's a disordered psychic trauma, this is. It's a disordered psychic or behavioral state resulting from severe mental or emotional stress or physical injury. And there's loads and loads and loads of people who've been through severe physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. And there are ways now to be able to forgive. Now, when I say forgive, that's not condoning the behavior, but forgiveness to me means that you take the hook out of yourself, right? And you let it go. And you let the universe stuff, do what it's got to do in order to, you know what I'm trying to say. So I like this word here, psychic change. I think that's what happened to me. I got a psychic change, right? And psyche means soul. It doesn't mean mind, it means soul. And I realized that something deep within me changed, and I started to see things in a much more clear and much more compassionate way, I think, more than anything else. So, to me, life's about principles now and not personalities. It's about allowing people to be, to understanding why different personalities and people behave in different ways. But we don't have to get sucked into their dramas now, because I do believe as adults, we're all personally responsible for the choices we make and for the consequences of those choices, really. So there I've become like the priest again, but I'll move on. So what we're really looking for is, we're looking for a balance, really, a balance between having a lot of attention, it's called it pressure, and we're calling it arousal now. And this is not sexual arousal I'm talking about, although it can lead to that. We're talking about emotional arousal, and emotion is the energy and for action, emotion. So obviously, in order to take action, we need some energy. But when we're exhausted, we're not aroused enough emotionally, right? We can't take the actions we want in order to improve our life, and we can become bored and become depressed. Why would we be lacking in energy? Because we're over here on the other side, right? Because this is the two sides of our nature. We're over here trying to do the best we can and driving ourselves on and exhausting ourselves. And what happens is it becomes so overwhelming, we spring back, miss the point of balance, right? And we go back into this low arousal thing. So what you can do here is you can take stimulants, if you like. You can take chocolate and coffee and sugar and all that sort of stuff in order to chemically try and get you back up here. But what then happens then is there's all those consequences of what you're ingesting then. I used to take handfuls of, do you remember Pro Plus? And there was other things that used to be given to me that stimulated me for a while, but if I didn't have them, right, I couldn't get back to this point here. So, but the other thing was as well, to keep me here as well and to numb me. If I took enough alcohol, I could sort of be numbed and just acting like an automaton, really. So how do you get to balance? How do you get back to balance? Well, I'm going to show you in a minute. So that's what we want. I mean, yeah, okay. Stress is then we're in fight and flight. We're living in fear. We're ducking and diving and dodging and weaving, but trying to do the best that we can. And if you're driving yourself on all the time while the accelerator's on and the brakes on as well, you're going to burn out rapidly, really. So what's the answer? The answer is to let go, absolutely. I'll explain as we go further. But this is what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to go to bed. How are we doing for time here? Because I don't know if I go on. Oh my God, I'll have to speak quicker. This might go on for more than an hour. We go to bed. We have a deep, this is in an ideal world, a deep restful sleep. We and then when we're in balance, when we wake up in the morning and we hear the birds twittering, this is called the dawn phenomenon or the dawn chorus. Then what's supposed to happen is our nervous system starts to activate and starts to come up to a normal and relaxed alert level. So we become mentally alert. That's it's the morning. I'm looking forward to getting on with the day. Those thoughts you have when you wake up. And your eyes widen a bit more because they've been deeply closed in order to shut out the sunlight so that we can go into the dark and the deeper brain waves, so we can go into rest and recuperation and recovery and all those things. We get a dry mouth because generally, I don't know whether you have noticed, but sometimes you can be slobbering when you wake up because the digestive processes have come online and you're digesting all your food properly in the nighttime. So if you don't get enough sleep or you don't get enough of it, you know, all these indigestion problems can arise. Our muscles become toned, so our blood flows into the muscles. So our muscles become tense, but toned, but remain flexible. That's very important. That our heart rate rises to a normal level. Our back straightens, but remains flexible. Chronic low back pain is such a prevalent thing. You know, we get butterflies in our stomach. That's the anticipation as the blood comes from our deeper organs and starts to fill our musculoskeletal system. So that's supposed to happen. The butterfly is an exhilaration effect, probably linked with, oh, I've been looking forward to going to work to see all my friends. You know, those feelings that you have. Your blood pressure rises to a normal level to get oxygen to your muscles. Your legs become strong and flexible. You start to sweat a bit more because sweat carries electrolytes. Electrolytes carry electricity, helps our nervous system to work better and our muscles to work better. And our nerves tingle for the same reason we get butterflies, because our nervous system is becoming fully activated in order to meet the challenges of the day. However, in excessive pressure, when we're out of balance, we become fuzzy-headed because we're in what's called the amygdala hijack now. And even though you want to think clearly, you can't. And the more effort you put into thinking clearly, the more fuzzy-headed you become. And this is when you go into one room and you think, I know this is a room, I've been here before, but I've got no idea why I've just come in it. So sometimes you automatically turn around and retrace your steps just to try and regain the thinking that you had before your head became fuzzy, you know. And this is what's happening to lots of people. They think they've got memory problems, but they're just stressed really and need to take some time out. You know, we get eye problems because our eyes remain dry. They become irritated. We get a lot of conjunctivitis and dry eye problems, really. And so this is because we're still in this stress response and we're not getting the features, if you like, of the rest and digest response. Head, neck and shoulder tension is a massive problem now, especially if you're working at a computer all day, you know. We get lack of taste, and what that means is that your digestive function isn't working properly, so your tongue becomes dry. You don't salivate, you know, you don't produce enough sort of saliva, right? And so therefore the saliva is needed to activate the taste buds, so we stop tasting stuff. So if you're moving towards more spicy, more hot or more sweet things, that's to try and get some more pleasure back into eating. So this is another thing that's happening, and unless you know these things, right, you mightn't be aware of it. And more than anything else is to become more body aware and to listen to the signals that our body's sending us. That's helped me more than I could possibly imagine, because I was so in my head that I was almost like disconnected from what my body was trying to tell me. So the heart rate stays high. So your heart rate, rather than coming up, down, it stays at the level that you're pushing it to. So it resets itself at a higher level. You know, and these are the serious things now. You know, we get sleep disturbance because our pineal gland, right, also closes down. And there's other things, sometimes, believe it or not, there's things in the water that can, don't start, Joe. There's things in the water that can close our pineal gland down and cause sleep disturbance. When you're sleep disturbed, you feel exhausted, so you get fuzzy. You see how it all works. We start to get irritable bowel. We can even get colitis and all these sorts of different things. Chronic low back pain, inflexibility. Our blood pressure again stays high because it needs to keep supplying oxygen to our muscles. Now, the other thing is, if we sense a threat and this fight and flight response kicks in and we don't move, then all these problems remain stuck in our muscle memory, you know. And people say, you know, doctors I've spoken to, oh, there's no such thing as muscle memory. Yes, there is. It's not in the muscles, it's actually in the mind, but you know, I haven't got time to explain to them at the moment. And we start to get lack of sensation because we get peripheral neuropathies because our nervous system starts to break down as well, because it's not flowing, it's almost like stuck. And that's why mindful movements, and we can get thermoregulatory problems because there's a gland up here called our hypothalamus that's trying to pick up the signals of our whole body all the time. So we can sometimes be cold in hot temperatures, you know, and people who are sort of menopausal, I have to say people now, can't say women anymore, get in trouble, right? But some people who are menopausal, including both men and women, they can have a lot of sort of hormonal responses, which cause hot flushes, or if you're in America, hot flashes. But here's the thing I've learned more than anything else: the throat. If you focus your attention on the throat, you'll notice when it's closing down. And the throat closes down in fight and flight or a perceived threat. It's to contain and pressurize the oxygen in the lungs. That's what that happens. Your throat closes, right, and becomes constricted. And that's why when some people are really stressed, their voice goes higher, their vibration changes, and that's because they're under threat, and they mightn't even be aware that most of this stuff is happening below the level of their consciousness. So become aware of your throat. And it's so important that more and more, from a metaphysical point of view, if your throat's open, then you can express yourself more fully now. And this is a way, and you can do things like primal screaming, or you can even get into really, really deep stuff where you can get a really low vibration that resonates through all of your throat to express all this trapped stuff that's in your psyche. So these are the things you might feel if you're in chronic fight and flight all the time, or getting worse now as this consciousness shift happens. You may feel irritable, aggressive, impatient, or wound up, overburdened. I can't cope. It's too much for me, and all these things. You may feel anxious and nervous or afraid. Now, let me just tell you about anger and anxiousness. If you're a person who tends to be anxious, angustia is the root word for a tightening or a narrowing, especially of the throat, right? And anxiety comes when you're projecting into the future. You can't be anxious about something that's happened in the past. You can be anxious about it catching up with you, but anxiety normally suggests that you're a person that's looking into the future and getting fearful about it, really, right? Angry people, right? Well, you can't be angry about the future, can you? Because nothing's happened yet to make you angry. So if you're angry or a resentful person, it means that you're mulling things over in your mind. Now, you mightn't be aware of this, but it would be useful to find out, because there are techniques whereby you can forgive what's happened in the past, not condoning the behavior, but you can let the hook off yourself, and then you can start to rebalance in your mind. Okay. Your thoughts are racing and you can't switch them off. Well, I used to be like that all the time. I had to get drunk because I'd put my head on the pillow and it would be like a 1,000,000-mile-an-hour vortex going on. And, I used to be so ill that I used to smash my head on the wall just to try and get some relief, and I'd also do some self-harming as well, almost like trying to let all this stuff that was going on in me out, So I was in a terrible state, really, but, thank God that's over. Unable to enjoy yourself, well, because you're on the treadmill, you can't relax. It's normal people, let's call it normal people for now, when they take a drink, it brings in a sense of intimacy and closeness and stuff like that. But if you're really stressed, when you take a drink, all you want to do is just get oblivion and just get some relaxation. It can lead to depression for the reasons that I've said. You can be totally uninterested in life and wish that it was just over because you're bored out of your mind. So these are the things, and I went through all this. Thank God I got this one back. You've lost your sense of humor, because what happens is, under stress, we go back to our childlike processing, and children can't take things. They don't understand metaphor, so they don't understand humor. So anything that you say to them, if it's a joke, they'll try and literally understand what it means. And because it's a metaphor and it's coming from between the lines, right, they think that you're picking on them, or you think that people are picking on you, you see. It's good. I used to have this really sense of dread all the time, that it's all going to work out badly. It wasn't a sense of dread, it did in the end, but I laugh now because it wasn't very funny at the time, but it's hilarious now. I was worried. I was neurotic all the time. I was always at the doctor's, and I felt neglected and lonely. So that's how you might feel if you're in chronic stress. Don't worry, there is a solution, by the way. How you might behave: can't make decisions, always worrying, always avoiding situations. So if you've got something to say to somebody but you can't face them, you'd see them and then duck and dive and hide from them, snapping at people, angry, all that sort of business. Biting your nails, well, that's another way of trying to sort of keep a movement and keep going. And, you know, because the biting is part of the fight and flight response. Picking at your skin, can't concentrate, eating too much or too little. Most people are what's called non-restrainers, and so they eat too much. Now, it's not because they're gluttons or they're greedy, it's because they're under ego threat. Their body calls out for more food because it needs the energy just in case they need to defend themselves. So you see, that's happening. And medicine doesn't know this yet, right? But they're catching on that it's this deep psychological processing that's causing people to eat for more food. And that's why people eat sweet and fat things. The sweet stuff's for possible action in the moment, and the fat stuff is for stored energy for long-term use. There are people who get really sick to the stomach, right? And they get a lot of tension in their guts and they find it difficult to eat. So they'll actually lose weight, you know, and that can sometimes be associated with the way the thyroid gland works. Smoking or drinking alcohol more than usual, yeah. Restless, but you can't sit still. So lots and lots of people have this what's called chronic inability to relax, where they sit down with the intention of watching a film, watching the telly, and then they're up 10 minutes later doing the hoovering, doing the dishes, doing something. And the other thing is being tearful or crying, you know. And how you might, you know, be physically affected: shallow breathing or hyperventilating, panic attacks. I had loads of panic attacks, and I had a lot of alcoholic epileptic fits as well. I've had a lot, you know what I mean? You know, you have to sort of go through it to be able to understand it. You know, maybe I picked a hard lesson, I don't know. Chronic muscle tension sounds boring. It causes so many joint problems and so much osteoarthritis. You know, it's even suggested that it might cause rheumatoid arthritis because of the impact on the thymus gland and the immune system. We start to get blurred eyesight or sore eyes. I've talked about that. Can't sleep, you know, having nightmares. Sexual problems as well, because the energy is misdirected really to survival. But, you know, we can lose interest in these things, and we can't bear anyone coming too close to us or being intimate, because we get what's called touchy, you know. So there's that thing is, don't touch me, get away from me, you know, and it causes a lot of relationship problems. So it's ways to relax really. And that's another thing, is alcohol can relax you, and then you can sort of get back into that, but you can't do it naturally unless you have the alcohol. Tired all the time. That's one of the most common reasons people go to the doctors. Doctor, I'm just tired all the time. I'm exhausted. Here's another one as well. This is called nocturnal bruxism, grinding your teeth at nighttime and clenching your jaw. And the reason is the fight and flight response. This is one of the most powerful responses in the body, is to bite your opponent's throat out. And so we've still got these indwelling sort of animal habits that under real stress and tension, all the body takes on the effect of defending itself. And we can get this called a temporomandibular joint dysfunction, which is basically when your head kills you and you get problems with your jaw, you know, and you can get like lockjaw and things. Chronic tension, headaches, sometimes associated with the solar plexus actually, but mostly associated with thinking, overthinking, and tension. Chest pains, high blood pressure, indigestion, constipation or diarrhea, feeling sick, dizzy off. So just basically feeling crap all the time. So this is what we want really. We want to be mentally alert, have our why, you know, and we want really to be in a state of what's called relaxed alertness. If you've done the stress questionnaire, I'm going to give you the figures now. So I'll whiz through this quickly. If you want, you can play this back again and stop it if you want to, but I just realized now that the times, we've come to time, but there's more I need to say really. If you're between 25 and 45 on it, you've got things under control, but there's always room for improvement. 46 to 70, most people are in this category. It's taken its effect on you, but it would be a good idea to find methods to alleviate your levels of stress. And if you're in this category, stop doing everything that you're doing. And believe it or not, I do a lot of executive stress management stuff. Lots of CEOs, right, are in this position here. And then we do blood pressures on them, and they've got high blood pressure as well, because high blood pressure is like an invisible killer, really. So they need to stop and they need to really seriously listen to what their body's saying to them and take immediate effect, you know. So there's more people in that category than you can possibly realize. And here are the 3 levels of stress management. I'm not going to have time to cover this, so I'll have to do a bit more next week. Primary, that's really to sort out your environment, you know, and this is where feng shui comes in, you know, because feng shui is not just about environmental conditions, but it's internal feng shui as well. It's all about Tao, it's all about flow, it's all about energy, really. And my mate Kate, you know, Lumley from Texas, she's got friends who are putting forward now feng shui, you know, and it's a light-hearted approach to cleaning your act up, basically. And I think it's a great idea, because I think light-heartedness or levity counteracts gravity. The secondary things, so prompt detection and management in the moment, and this is where my stuff comes in, really, the mindful breathing. It's to become aware of your body sensations. If you feel stress or tense or triggered in any moment, don't go forward or make decisions. Step back, create space, breathe deeply, sink down, relax, tune into your heart, tune into your intuition, and look for different options, and then make a choice. And that's something that you need to practice, is learning to let go quickly. And you can't really do much about the first thought. It's what you do with the second thought that's most important. So that's something I've learned. And then the tertiary one is, it's really unlocking, and I call this quantum disentanglement. It's unlocking all the stuff that you've put in there through your lifetime. So this is about deconditioning, deconstruction, and more than anything else is letting go of all the fear-based and the pride-based programs that have been unconsciously driving you forward throughout your life. And I won't go through these, we haven't got time for that really, but all of that. But here's the stuff. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this. These are the things that have helped me more than anything else. Mindfulness-based interventions. This used to be seen even 5 years ago by the medical profession, right, as woo-woo, and now it isn't, because of people like myself and my colleagues who are into mindfulness, but also the neuroscientific aspects of what's going on in the brain, in the heart, and the connection between those 2 organs. So mindful breathing now, it's so important. And then we can use this mindful breathing. You can actually put yourself onto a heart rate variability monitor, and you can see how the effect that breathing has on the way your heart works. And then if you practice these things for 3 10-minute sessions a day for say 30 days, you know, and I'll explain it before I go, then I'm sure that your life will change beyond your wildest dreams, because it has for me and many others. Exercise. Now, if you're doing exercise to try and get faster and be better than other people, that'll cause you more stress. So it's got to be mindful exercise where it's basically relaxed. And it needs to be a combination of both aerobic and resistance exercises or toning, because you want to try and build your strength up, but also your cardiovascular capabilities, really. So it's being mindful about your breathing while you're exercising as well. And even when you're lifting heavy weights, it's important not to restrain your breathing, but to allow your breathing out in a regulated way. And it's always the tension, always the push out, always comes with a breathing out, not a restrained breath. Yoga. Yoga as, again, another thing that's transformed my life. Hatha yoga and yin yoga, because to me, they understand the flow of energy in the body more than most other yogas, because there's lots of different yogas. I mean, there's Bhakti yoga, which is about devotion, but there's also modern yogas now, which are basically based upon egomania. I hope I haven't offended anybody, but you know, there's got to be a deeper understanding in my view, and it all centers around mindful breathing. So Hatha yoga and yin yoga, marvelous. Tai Chi. I've practiced martial arts since I was a child, really, and I was always practicing kung fu and various martial arts because I was afraid, and I got really good at it, and I was still afraid. And I've realized that it's the soft arts of martial arts, you know, because they're healing arts. You know, if you know the pressure points, you can kill somebody and heal somebody. So it's important, once again, to be familiar with the meridian systems and all the pressure points and tender points and, you know, different points. So Tai Chi, I've learned two different forms, you know, the Yang form and Chen style Tai Chi. But in the end, we've developed, me and somebody else, Dave McCarthy, we've developed something called Fu Shen Tai Chi. And Fu Shen was the Chinese god of happiness. So it's all about moving with a chuckle, basically. And this cold immersion, you know, Wim Hof, I say from Wim Hof to F off, you know, because there comes the wild water swimming. I love this, right? And I went in the lake yesterday. It's cooled down considerably. I was freezing for hours afterwards, but there's almost like a sort of a cold sensation of it's really good, this, you know. So that's, I think it helps your nervous system to become more flexible, more resilient. And there's no doubt about it that I've worked with lots of people and I swim with lots of people who've had mental health problems, and it's helped them immensely, really. So that's something that you sort of need to wean yourself into, really. And being out in nature more than anything else, is hugging a few trees and just like breathing in a breath of fresh air, if you can find any clean fresh air knocking about, you know. So they're the things that have helped me. And also I've looked at my diet. The thing where I lose weight most quickly if I go onto a reduced carbohydrate diet. So that's reducing starch, reducing sugars. And when I go into this as well, there's more protein that I take in, and I can do more toning exercises as well, you know. So, but more than anything else, is this is the thing that's helped me more than anything else, was to get out of my head and into my heart. And the way that you do it simply is, you know, and it doesn't, it's, you know, if your head comes in to try and complicate it, then you're lost, really. All I'm saying is, we'll focus on a feeling first, and focus on feelings first. That's, if you want a little mnemonic to help you, that's F off, right? So if you can remember F off and think, oh, hang on, I need to focus on a feeling first. If you can put your hand on your heart and you can just slightly press your hand against your heart, right? And then just become aware of the palm of your hand. And now become aware as well of a positive emotion, you know, emotion that brings with it a caring feeling. So if you've got a favorite child, you know, bring the picture to your mind, and that then should bring with it a feeling of caring, compassion, love, loveliness, really. And so you get shut of the child out of your head then, and just stay with the feeling. So if you breathe that feeling in very, very gently, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're basically breathing in a feeling of love and light and all those sorts of feelings, you know. Now, if children don't work for you, you've got a favorite pet, you can do pets, right? If children and pets don't work for you, you can like put your wallet there if that makes you feel happy. Whatever brings with it a feeling of openness and comfortableness and, you know, all that stuff. Just get that feeling and breathe it in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's another mantra, probably get bland for this, but I say breathe in the light and breathe out the shite, right? Because I'm from Sikkim, and that's the sort of language they use in Sikkim. But what it means is really is that when you're doing this, you're actually causing your heart to work in a different way. Your heart will then send more coherent signals back to your brain. Your brain will then move out of what's called a frantic beta state, and it will come down into an alpha theta state, and it will be like in a midpoint, 0 point, you know. And that's the point whereby you can feel emotionally calm, and you can feel much more clear-minded, and you can make healthier choices. And if you practice this session, you know, this for 3 10-minute sessions, as I say, for 30 days, right? But people say to me, I haven't got time for this, right? Then, you know, maybe you'll have to wait until the pain gets worse or you get more confused or whatever. But I snubbed this for a long time because my biomedical science head would not accept the simplicity of this. And if you don't want to just do it with one hand, you can put both hands, or you can put one hand on your tummy and you can imagine that you're cradling a beautiful sacred child. And I call this cradling the sacred child. And if it brings with it a feeling of loveliness and whatever, you can almost imagine that your child and your heart are synchronizing, and that you're breathing as one, you see. So there's all sorts of different things, whatever works for you. But what I'd say to you more than anything else is, don't knock it till you've tried it, because I did for years and I nearly died as a consequence of it, you know. So there we are. If you've got any questions or comments, you can go on here, you know, you can click on that there and you can leave some comments on there, but I'll just come away from this now. I've gone on a bit. I always go on a bit. I've only just touched on those things there, really. But people say to me, well, which is the best? All I can say to you is, when you put your hands on your heart like that and you get into that synchronized sort of breathing, it's almost like a different feeling comes in. And it's almost like an answer will emerge. So rather than something coming in from the outside into your head and down, this comes from your heart and from your soul. And when I say soul, I don't mean religion. I mean your deepest processing part of you, you know. And I think if you allow the answers to emerge, right, if it works for you like it's worked for me, I swear to you, you're like, your life will change, right, for your benefit and the benefit of those people around you. I'm glad now that I've gone through this stuff. I wasn't when I went through it. It was horrendous. But I'm glad. It almost seems like it's been on purpose. And all I'm doing really is passing on what I'm learning on a daily basis. And in that regard, I hope it's been useful. So on that note, I'm going to go now. And thanks very much. And I hope you've got something from it. And may the force be with you. Toodaloo.